All right, we're live now. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in or watching later or however you prefer to consume this content. I am Natanya Barron, the GeekMom Game of Thrones, I guess, technically host. I make people move along in conversation, but really we just drink wine and talk about Game of Thrones. So there's not that much of a structure here. We're a little late this week because of a number of things, including the fact that I totally cricked my neck and I was pretty much asleep last night, which was my makeup night for the night before. So this is Tuesday now, 2 days after the show has been on. So Michael and I finally had a chance to watch. Andrea was ahead of things. There are bugs. I apologize. So interesting title. Not a lot to read into it. I think it was one of those kind of obvious laws of gods and men. We had that there sort of theme throughout the entire thing. Michael, do you want to lead us off talking about the opening?
So the opening was a visit back to Stannis and right? That's how it started? We did just watch it.
Yes.
And
you need to take notes like Andrea does. You're not a good student, Michael.
Sorry, I'm having all sorts of computer issues. So yeah, that was really interesting to kind of see the see Stannis with his tail between his legs, kind of consulting with a third party to see if there was something that they could do to help him out. One thing I do want to point out is how awesome the sort of cut into Braavos was. That was one of my favorite parts of the entire episode. Definitely didn't disappoint. So
yeah, I'm wondering if you get on this ship and you drive through that guy's legs, I'm wondering what you see if you look up.
Yeah.
You know, that whole entryway? Like, is it really just, yeah, Braavos, Iron Bank, no underwear?
Yeah, I say Iron Bank.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I don't know, but I will say one of the things that struck me sort of as a fantasy nerd of the last 20-odd years was how nice the special effects have gotten on TV. Because, like you're saying, that scene, the cut into Braavos, Michael, was about as good as the Guardians in Lord of the Rings trilogy on the river, when they're paddling down. And
right.
And this is television. This is a show that doesn't have 3 years lead time. And it's kind of like the Harry Potter factor. If you watch the first Harry Potter film, the special effects are just horrible. Like when Neville's flying around on the broomstick, he looks like he's made out of silly putty. But by the end, it's so good. You're like, did magic just get better? Or but yeah, I thought they used their budget very intelligently on this show.
Yeah, it was.
Actually, I wondered something related to this scene. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but I've had a glass of wine already, and I'm talkative as it is. But the bath scenes look just like some of the bath scenes in the Spartacus TV series. I almost wondered if they were like, "Yo, we need some Roman looking to put some sexy ladies in." And they're like, "Oh, there's that show on Stars. Let's just use their sexy lady spot." So maybe they're recycling sets. I don't know.
Which, yeah, we got to see boobs again. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had boobs. So, and unnecessary boobs. So that was...
They were happy boobs. I mean, at least they were, the brothel ladies in Braavos seemed significantly happier than they were in the capital.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they seem to be having a pretty good time. That was definitely a callback to, the whole sex position, which Game of Thrones seems to be so famous for. It was welcome.
So I just, it's kind of fascinating just to see just all the different body types out there. I'm really getting a lesson in all the different ways that it can be put together.
I was actually thinking, not to jump forward, but the scene of the guy who sort of, the noble who was trying to appeal to Daenerys, he had really crooked teeth. Beautiful voice, but like really crooked teeth. And I was like, it's nice that we're kind of not just casting Hollywood gorgeous people, because he's a very attractive man. but he had like it made him look a little bit different. And I noticed that with Lena Headey, she's the same way. She's striking, but she's British. She doesn't have perfect teeth like many American actors do. So I don't know. I think it's neat, but body type as well.
How do you say that guy's name? Hizdar Zolorak? Do you remember?
Like, why is the Lorax here? Yeah, yeah.
The guy who was asking Dany if he could bury his father instead of keeping him crucified.
Yeah, and I guess we could. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a whole lot more to say about Salazar Sand and what's his face?
And Davos.
Well, I mean,
you had the whole. Oh, money still, is the, engineering force. It's going to dictate who wins. I mean, at least at this point, you had that feeling for a second when, what's his name from Sherlock, who was the banker guy. Did you catch that?
Your place. He's like, it's blah blah. And I'm like, who's blah blah?
But he says something like, so how many men you got fighting for you? How much food you have? And, he readily acknowledged the fact that Tommen was, he'd heard the rumors that Tommen was a bastard, and he was fine with that. So I was worried for a minute that we were going to have, like a 2008 economic moment there in Westeros. But instead, Davos saved the day with his fingerless hands, or knuckle, missing that one knuckle. Yeah, that was fun. Actually, that was fun CGI too.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Like, Stannis really is the most boring person, like, in all of Westeros. Like,
I want to say to Davos, what are you doing? Like, why have you hitched your boat, Onion Man?
Because he took half his fingers. He pays his debts, and for whatever reason, that has appealed to Davos's psyche. Like, he's the only one that has proven to him, I guess, right? I don't know.
I would say at this point, we're good. I'm going to go off. I'm going to go hitch my boat to someone who maybe has a better chance of winning this thing. I don't know, yeah. But he pulled it out for him, because it was Davos's speech that, got them the money then to hire Salazar Sand.
It was like enough money just to make them leave. Creepy finger stumps at us. Let's just make him shut up.
Look, I imagine that Davos knows how much money they need to actually, fight a battle, fight a war to win the throne.
Well, and hire enough guys to win it, and boats.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seemed a little strange that they skipped over all of the, I'm sure, the specifics and the details behind how things were going to be repaid and precisely what stake they're going to own in the new kingdom and that sort of thing.
But isn't that sort of the whole, like, I mean, that's what Bravos does, right? They ask questions later when they're not paying. Right?
Well, if they're a really dumb bank, then that's how they do it. But I imagine that they probably know a thing or two about what's going to happen, how they're going to get repaid, whose kneecaps are going to get broken, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So speaking of debts and payment, the juxtaposition of this scene was to Yara on the boat with her Ironborn, making this attempt to save her brother, her prince, who gave, I thought, a rather rousing, beautiful discussion to her crew. For those of us who read the books, without being too much of a spoiler, this sort of kind of happens later, much later. So it's very weird and confusing. I thought that was the absolute weakest part of the whole entire episode.
It almost had like a Monty Python feeling to it. It was like, yeah, let's go and get him. What's done to him is done to all of us. Woo! Yeah. We're running away. They're dogs.
Two dogs.
I thought her speech was like really uninspired and hackneyed and kind of stupid, actually.
Well, I that's coming from her, and in the show, we rarely get any kind of rousing interest from women. For me, it was meaningful because she should be the prince, right? She's got the balls, literally and figuratively.
Which makes me wonder why the hell she cares so much. I still don't understand why. I mean, I guess it's an insult.
Her brother's, you know, Willie in a box. I mean, no matter how your brothers or sisters, like, if you're an Ironborn, this is like your blood, and she read it, you know, word by word. They're gonna keep cutting off bits of him.
And the other thing about that wasn't, didn't Theon have like 7 brothers, and weren't they all killed?
Yeah.
Wasn't Theon the only son left alive? So by doing that now, I mean, I don't know. Are there any other Greyjoys besides Yara? Is she it?
Cousins like they have with the Lannisters. They don't even remember their names.
For me, it's almost like it's a very stark contrast to what her personality is like in the book.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like and it's also a stark contrast as to how the Ironborn are in the books, which is, I think that if a group of Ironborn were told that their prince's, scepter was removed, they would probably laugh about it and say, well, he's not our prince anymore. He's our...
I agree.
And I guess I just...
Don't go being too spoilery. So, I mean, it just...
There's no spoilers there.
I don't feel like in the books. Not that you're doing that. I just, for our listeners, for those who haven't read the books and have no idea, you're basically just trying to say that seemed kind of weak sauce compared to Team Squid normally.
Well, yeah, the Ironborn aren't a bunch of gung ho, oh, royalty, blah blah. I mean, it just, I don't know. It seemed really disingenuous, and I didn't really. That whole thread happened too fast. It was like they were back in the boat. Why'd you guys even show up?
Right.
That's how I felt at the end of that scene.
Yeah. Well, I just felt like, wait, you came here and you're afraid of dogs? Like, they're not. Like, you just killed like 10 dudes.
Kill the dogs. I mean,
or kill Ramsay. He's like right in front of you.
Yeah. It was just really weird. It was like, well, you didn't expect that he would be slightly different now that he's, been castrated? I don't know. I mean, changes you a little bit. I would imagine.
Didn't Theon try to bone his own sister earlier? So...
Well, that was before he knew who she was.
They're not the brightest bunch, really.
It kind of reminded me of, like Monty Python. They were like, retreat!
Totally. No, it was totally like that. It was absolutely bizarre.
And you have people, I mean, there are people who are very pragmatic, very... what can you give me? And that whole, do they show the religious right in the show at all?
No, I don't think so. Not really, because I mean, the drowned god stuff.
They drown themselves and then bring themselves back. I mean, they are a people that aren't afraid of death.
Yeah, they're hardcore.
But they're afraid of dogs. They're really afraid of dogs.
Well, what about...
maybe they don't have dogs in the Iron Islands. I don't know. I mean...
All right, that's a possibility.
And I mean, she didn't have a really big crew to begin with anyway, so I kind of felt like it was sort of a graveyard shift to begin with. But then she looked at him, she's like, not worth it. I'll see you sometime.
Well, and the other thing that I think about her is that she, in the book, she's honest. That's what, she's honest and strong with her crew. That's why they follow her. And I think going back to what Micah was saying, that whole, what happened to him happens to all of us. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I could just imagine all of the sailors looking down at themselves. No. You sure did.
Well, and I so from a narrative storytelling perspective, I think that we just have to understand that they're trying to we've talked about this before because in the book, the Theon story doesn't unfold till the very last book that we've read. So all this is happening kind of behind the scenes. We don't get to see it. So they're trying to fold it in a little more naturally. And I think they just kind of came to a point where they're like, gotta do something to remind them that that Theon is still around, and we don't want to torture him again because people are probably gonna stop watching. So maybe let's have Yara come and try to save him, and then decide not to. So
instead of torturing him, let's give him a bath.
Just set her back again, or maybe not. I mean, maybe she's gonna have a party, and I don't know.
But that I have to say that bath scene, they had me ratcheted up. I was convinced that Ramsay was gonna do something, not nice. And, when at the end he says, "I want you to become Theon again," dun dun dun. That was like, oh, okay, he's not gonna hurt him.
At least not immediately. Although I turned to Michael afterwards, I'm like, he really looks like a deranged hobbit. He really has this sort of like, he's a very sweet looking face, but then
he doesn't blink.
Yeah, he does that awful smile, and it's like, ugh. So I mean, yeah. So I guess that just leaves us with Dany before we head on to the Lannister crew.
Dany and goat kebabs.
Goat kebabs.
So we get to see some boobs, and we get to see some dragons.
Dragons be dragons.
So my question to you guys is there like an implied...
Rhaego? Is that his name? Rhaego, the big black one?
The dragon?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the dragons' names.
It's important, Michael. Didn't you read the books?
My question is there like an implication that the goat herd's like son got killed, or is that just something I was reading into?
I was expecting to see human bones, but they made it very clear that those were goat bones.
Okay.
So
well, and he
got torched.
She said something like, I'll pay him 3 times the amount of the worth of the goats. She didn't mention anything about a child. But you definitely, I think that scene when Drago, flies up from the canyon and is right in front of the kid, I think that the point of that was, all right, it was goats this time, but it's only a matter of time before, he expands his palate.
Sweeter meat.
So he's like the Pippin took, like he just threw it down and... It was a pebble in the books. It wasn't a goddamn skeleton. Sorry. Nerd tangent, excuse me. Yeah, and then I think that they tried to... We had sort of complained last week, and some people mentioned sort of that we were maybe harsh on Daenerys, or that, we had differing opinions, we were more sensitive to it. I think they tried to make up... They tried to show more of her consequences for her...
Yes.
actions.
Yeah, she definitely, it was very funny watching her say, "Give that man 3 times more than his goats were worth." And then she's like, "Oh, that was a good day. How many more people do we have?" And they're like, 220. And they're much more unhappy than this goat herd. And she I had the sense that she begins to see, oh, there's actually a lot of hard work in staying and running a place, and that she was seeing, her character was seeing, this isn't all glamorous and glorious and easy. So that was good, because I felt like her character needed that.
At least she gets to sit down. Everyone else had to stand up the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, Barristan Selmy's like old, and
Yeah.
He should sit down. Maybe. Yeah, I thought it was... I always find it really interesting. To me, the most interesting part about that was the juxtaposition of the small council talking about the girl in the East, and sort of Tyrion's dismissal of her. Or not Tyrion, Tywin's sort of dismissal of her. Dragons haven't won a war in 300 years, blah, 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 blah.
Well, he didn't necessarily... He said dragons haven't won a war, but armies. That's a...
But she's got both.
Right. And her dragons are still, I guess, adolescents, so...
Well, they still torched, you know, a herd of goats, and that's not peanuts. I mean, one of the things that I found interesting was that Cersei continues to kind of prove her, I don't know, inability to think to the future, and oh, she's just a little girl, you know. She's
Well, see, I took that more as like they hadn't actually informed her. And that's my whole argument with Cersei. I think that they only bring her into these discussions occasionally.
they just said she has an army of 8,000 people.
But she didn't know what the Unsullied were. I don't think I honestly think she's like a total like shut-in. I mean, she has not left King's Landing in 20 years. You know, she doesn't have a world. She's been raising her little incest babies, and she's been, you know, pining after Jaime about him.
Well, but I also think that she is bringing her experience as a woman to her assumptions about Daenerys. And she has always felt very powerless. And so maybe on some level she can't even fathom someone like Daenerys. So she's saying, but, you know, she's just a child half world away. If it were Cersei at that age, maybe it would be, you know, I think she's bringing her experience to looking. And she's a self-absorbed character. I think that's generally the way she goes about looking at the world. So
I mean, she's like the queen of anecdotal evidence, right? I am the most awesome queen in the world, so clearly no other one can possibly be as awesome as I am.
But even she felt powerless. She didn't have dragons. She had to get married.
And I think that this whole ploy to get Tyrion killed is just a way for her to try to have some kind of agency in something.
Right.
Because I don't think she's a sympathetic character whatsoever, but if you really look at the scheme of things that have happened in King's Landing, she really has the short end of the stick every single time. Like, her husband is killed, her you know, her lover is sent away, her daughter is sent away, her son is killed. You know, her other brother is a total mess up. So I mean, I'm not saying she's awesome, but I'm saying she's been through enough that she's clinging to something to try to have some kind of power and authority. And I think her belittling of Daenerys is exactly that. Is well, I could never have done that, so she can't possibly.
Right. That's what I think.
That makes a lot more sense. I'm conceding. I love your explanation, Andrea. Subscribe to your newsletter.
We don't have to invite boys. I'm just saying, we didn't have any boys last season. We don't have to have them now.
Oh, I like having the male perspective.
So how does
you?
I did think it was interesting. I always find it curious what they choose in the sort of the recaps at the beginning, and they definitely held the whole Varys thing, and Varys' discussion with Oberyn leading up to but Oberyn's discussion with Varys was very interesting. The first person to see through to his actual past and background, and someone who... What are you doing, Michael?
Sorry.
Okay. That was your hand, right?
I was fixing something. Look, it's the male perspective, and just
right. Right. We've killed Andrea. She's like disappeared from the screen for a second. I was being serious and talking about discourse between two main characters. I don't know what you were doing.
I was listening.
Uh-huh. I love Oberyn. I've actually decided that his voice reminds me very much of Nathan Fillion's voice. And now I love him even more. But I thought it was interesting, you know, I think Varys lives in some ways a sheltered life, a life that he certainly escaped from, and to have kind of the chinks in his armor. And I thought his discussion about desire was really fascinating. If he doesn't have time to desire things, then he can focus on other things.
I had a question with that. Because he's a eunuch.
Oh, we're getting some really bad feedback.
Ooh.
I'm not getting it.
Yeah, it's coming out of your computer.
Let me try again. Oh.
Yeah, anytime we speak, it repeats into Natanya.
It's me?
Yeah, because I can see little levels whenever I talk.
Here, hold on.
I'm not getting... Oh. Be right back.
And she muted. Oh.
Is that any better?
Am I? Yeah, I'm still feeding back.
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, it's you're hearing our voice, and our voice is going into your microphone.
Is that any better?
No.
Should I just put my headphones
Maybe
on?
we should just let Natanya talk through the rest, and we'll just nod.
There we go. We'll nod.
That's what we do anyway, right? I mean, you guys are just here to be like, is it still bad?
Okay, actually...
It's weird. Your video is all weird too. It's all like up and to the left for some reason.
I noticed yours is up and to the left.
I'm not seeing anything odd with the video.
No.
Oh. But I was... Alright, so I was going to ask a question. When was Varys turned into a eunuch?
He was very young.
So he wouldn't have had desire yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I am having nasty feedback. Hold on. You guys keep talking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it happened when he was pretty young.
I thought that he had told Tyrion at one point. He was like 7 or 8, I thought. So,
yeah, which definitely makes makes an interesting point as to he doesn't really know what the hell he's talking about.
That's what I wondered when he said that. Oh, I'm beyond desire. Maybe
it's an interesting point in that he has been able to kind of experience and observe what desire has wrought upon everything without necessarily feeling it, and perhaps that's the only way that someone can truly kind of say, it's not worth it. If they don't have that experience, it's impossible to kind of claim that the act of having desire creates more destruction than anything else, because everyone has it, but he doesn't.
Well, I'm just wondering if he's coming from a place of, is it really that he lacks desire, or that he's been traumatized so badly that it's comfortable for him to think he has no desire. I don't know, that was just something that went through my head when he said that. But I was glad to see him back. He hasn't been as present the last couple episodes. And my sense is that he is largely a force for good, but it's like long-range good. And so sometimes he'll do things that are not overtly good, like when he testified against Tyrion at the trial. He definitely, it seemed unkind. But I think that he has the long-term stability of the king in mind with every move that he makes. So
Yeah,
I was glad to see him back.
Well, the king, Varys is very much, he wants Daenerys on the throne.
You think that?
Oh, it was explicitly mentioned in the first season. He met with what was the guy's name? The guy that Daenerys and Viserys were living with.
Oh, right.
So he was. I'm pretty sure he's always been kind of trying to pull those strings.
I mean, he certainly knows the most. Do you guys hear me better? Is this?
Yeah.
Okay. I also have hair sticking out all over the place. This is totally gorgeous. Earmuffs. I think that's, when they talk about his little birds and his, when they're like, do your birds go to Marine? And he's like, of course they, it's almost like Nobody knows more of what's happening than Varys. I think anyone who trusts him, i.e. Tyrion, is fooling themselves to think that he is the one that is. I mean, so many people are trying to orchestrate things, and I think that this episode was a great way of showing us that, like, even though Jaime and Tywin thought that they were orchestrating things, Tyrion also had his own agenda, and other people can be pulling strings left and right. So, but Varys is it in a way that's very unseen. I think that's where his biggest strength is.
Well, and I guess he and Littlefinger get looked over because they're not, the same level of royalty, but they seem to be the guys running the show. But I have to assume that they are not colluding together. Like, I don't believe that Varys was involved in in Joffrey's death. I don't know.
I think it's the same thing though that we talked about with Tywin, is that he knew it was happening. He totally was aware that it was happening.
He looked very bored at that wedding. Like, you saw him in a couple scenes, and in retrospect, I wonder if he was thinking, "Oh, when is this thing either when is this going to be over, or when is this going to be over?"
Totally.
I looked it up just to be sure. During the first season, Arya overhears him and the guy's name is Illyrio.
Oh, right.
And they were basically saying that they wanted the Civil War to happen so that, like, the Dothraki could come over and just, like, rout everybody. So definitely seems like he's a big House Targaryen fan.
But that was even before the dragons, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well,
so,
he had the dragon eggs.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Because they were given to her on her wedding. So.
All right, interesting.
Yeah, I think what Andrea is saying about the fact that Varys is he's in it for the long con.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
And I think that's probably to bring it back to the Lannisters. I think that's if anything is Tywin's weak spot, it's his inability to see beyond that. He's playing one or two moves ahead. Varys is playing like 1,000 moves ahead. And when Jaime makes that point, like, what about it? You talk about 1,000-year legacy, and who's going to be here? I think he was just waiting for Jaime to make that promise. But what a crappy dad.
Absolutely, you got the idea when Jaime was like, "I'll give up being the King's Guard, and let me save my brother." And Tywin was like, "Oh, it took you long enough. Okay, done deal."
Bunch of jerks. And I will point out, before we talk too much more about Tyrion, how good of a job they've made. I swear they must dye that kid's hair the same exact box color that they used on Joffrey, because when he turns around, every time Tommen turns around, he looks just like Joffrey. It's eerie. Because in the books, he's supposed to be like a little kid, so he doesn't really have that kind of thing. But here's like 12, 13, so he's kind of he's getting that sort of, builtness to him. And it's eerie. All the talk of Joffrey. And also, Sir Dantas' body washed up on shore.
Yeah.
Was that like a little too much for you guys?
No, I think that was done. That was
purpose. You think Mr. Baelish had the exact current and knew exactly what he was doing?
No, I think Mr. Baelish probably just got someone to hop down in the boat and dump his body on the shore.
Oh.
But that said, to me, yeah, there is a pretty large ring of people who knew about, or at least know about it now, know that Joffrey was murdered, and were in on some piece of it. For him to find Dantos and to find the piece of the necklace, I mean, how would you know otherwise, unless you knew that the necklace was used to poison Joffrey? How would that suddenly have significance?
And that's the thing. Like, if anyone else is playing a longer game, I'm not sure who I would put my money on, if it's Varys or if it's Littlefinger. Because, I mean, they're both, or if they're together in this whole crazy. I mean,
I think they're playing different long games, and they just so happen to kind of be playing the same game right now. And
I think that's it.
Baelish is getting laid a whole lot more, so maybe that's the whole thing that he was talking
But I
about.
don't think he's any happier about it than if Varys was. Well, not that he can, but
I was surprised that we didn't revisit that whole subplot.
Well, did you see the attractions for next week?
No.
Oh no, we didn't.
This great scene of Lysa holding Sansa over the moon door, so we get moon door, and she's screaming at him.
I mean, boo, boo. We don't want.
Right, horrible.
Moon door. She's so complex and interesting, and she's been through such a hard time. Your heart has to go out to Sansa at that point. Lysa she has just gone from one PTSD experience to another. And how old is she? 14? Yeah, I mean, in the book she's 14, or 15, I think, 16. I will say, I do like the fact that they're clearly saying, like, it's taken years for stuff to happen. They keep mentioning every year the dragons grow bigger, so we know that they're making more time because the books are so compressed. I mean, I don't think it's even possible for all that stuff to happen. So I think that they're making a really good choice. But Michael and I were saying, if they do what they did with Yara's / Asha's story, where are they going to go with Theon at this point? But we already talked about that.
Yeah, they seem to be kind of not moving as quickly as we may have initially thought on that particular thread. So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Ramsay got his marching orders. He's to take what is it, Moat Cailin, the Greyjoys' castle.
He didn't say where he was supposed to go.
His dad didn't tell him to go and take that castle. Like he had a moment a couple episodes back where he was disgusted, and he basically implied the only way to get back into my good graces, now that you've ruined the one piece of leverage that we could have, is to. And he sends him on a quest somewhere. Those were his parting words. And so my assumption is that now Ramsay is saying, okay, the only way that I can do what my dad wants me to do is to kind of put Theon back together enough to...
Just enough.
Right, just enough to almost use him like a Trojan horse and get in. And so I guess the interesting thing there will be, if Theon gets back together a little bit, will he, get any sort of sense of agency, or is he just destroyed permanently?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, just because, let me just say, the blazon on their shields was awesome. I love the art that they did for the Krakens. I think it's splendidly awesome. But wondering, what does Theon have to go back to? Like, even if everything went back perfectly, like, he has the crappiest existence of almost anybody. Like, his sister couldn't even, like, kill a bunch of dogs. His dad could care absolutely less about his existence. The only people he's actually ever nice to totally stuck it to him. Well, he stuck it to them.
And now they're mostly dead.
Like, I mean, I would probably prefer to be Reek. I mean, at least he knows what's up. At least he knows.
But I mean, does he? I mean, he was like a beaten puppy in the bathtub. He was flinching at every movement. It's just, I don't know. It seems like, I mean, Varys seems to have a pretty good time about things, and he's.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole. I'm sure somebody somewhere in some graduate program has written a whole entire thesis about castration in Westeros and how it affects certain characters and whether or not it's voluntary or. I mean, because there is so much. I mean,
there's an awful lot of it, isn't there?
It really is, and I mean, not to read too much into this, but it is a dude writing the story. And is that like the greatest fear, to have that taken, that absolute power, right? I mean, you either have people on one hand in the brothels sticking it to girls every time they can, or you can't. And what do you do when you can't? And what does that mean? I don't know. I'm just theorizing.
It's a good question.
I mean, what does that say for the author? What does that say for agency and power? Women certainly don't have that. There's no female circumcision or anything along those lines in this particular world. But there's lots of penis hacking. I mean, there's more than any show I've ever watched or any book I've ever read.
Breaking boundaries.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in a way it's an equalizer, a horrible, horrible equalizer, in that, like, very few people are safe in this world. There are horrible, traumatic threats, you know, that basically that everybody has to worry about daily. It's like a little bit of a walking PTSD world, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, like I said, the women worry about rape, but it's not that the men don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are dying young, and not. I mean, if you think about it, the Greyjoys have lost all the other heirs to the throne. The only one left doesn't even have a vehicle by which to make more heirs. So.
Beautiful. Nice.
Anyway, let's talk about Tyrion. Okay.
Well, wait, I just want to say one. I want to say one other thing. If I were the dad, then I wouldn't be sending Arya out to Yara out to fight battles.
Didn't you say I'm going no matter what? I mean, wasn't it like you're not going to stop me?
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. It happened so quickly. I just couldn't keep everything that was happening.
I thought it happened last season, though. It was like the last episode of last season where she got the letter. I think it was more like, I'm going to go find him no matter what. So it took her like 5 episodes to get there, presumably. In like ship time, that's like 2 weeks, and that's like in the show like a year. So
it took her a quarter of an episode to retreat after getting there. So.
It was less than a quarter of an episode. She was like, I don't do dogs. Krakens are fine. Drowned god people are fine.
The big thing that everyone's talking about, the set piece of the show, was the trial of Tyrion Lannister.
Yes. Some of the best lines in the show's history, perhaps. And it still holds my theory that the true hero of the story is Tyrion Lannister. Still hard to watch for those of us that sort of have the idea of what's happening.
I thought that Ned Stark was the hero of the story too for the first.
And I mean, he made I thought that was a good point from Jamie too. That he drew that parallel when Tywin was like, "That's what you said. That's what was promised to Ned Stark."
Well, no, it was Tyrion who drew that parallel.
Oh, was it? Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Jamie came back and told him, "You just admit guilt and we'll send you to the wall." And Tyrion was like, "Really?
I've heard this story. How did it end?"
Also, the wall has no chicks. Well, they have some chicks, but they're kind of weird.
Yeah, mortality rate there too.
I was really, really bummed out by Tommen and the whole spiel he gave, and just the sort of the look that Tyrion gave him as he walked away. That was just really, really tough.
Yeah.
There was so much that was brutal with that scene. There was nobody except for Jamie that really, tried to offer Tyrion anything.
Yeah.
And they, there's Tommen cloaking himself in, legal jargon and saying, "Okay, I'm out of here."
Saying exactly what Tywin's telling him to say, because he's Mr. Puppet. Tommen the puppet.
And then going through, and Meryn Trant, okay, we don't expect him to say great things about Tyrion, but it was like this progression where it was like, oh, you too. It was brutal to watch. And so I actually was happy when he kind of loses it at the end, because it was like, well, at least he should be able to have that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean the Shay stuff. I mean, you kind of see that. I mean, I'm sure viewers were not super surprised because they did all that heavy-handed, like let's foreshadow this that this is not going to end well, and he sees the ship in the distance. But yeah, and she gave him that whole line, "I'm your whore," because that's what he said to her verbatim, and we all kind of
When
had
he
it.
was trying to save her.
When he was trying, and she's a dumbass. I hate like that's endlessly frustrating to me because they could have painted well, Martin could have painted her as a more intelligent girl who could have picked up on subtlety, but she was too jealous about Sansa to nah. But yeah, I mean I thought she did a good job on the stand. The actress, I know she sort of seemed more hollowed, like almost like she just seemed more like she'd lost 10 pounds or something, and she's already tiny. She looked very sad and very sort of withdrawn, but I don't know.
Do you feel like there's the possibility that she was forced to do this? Do you think that she volunteered?
I want to think that, but she played the role to the hilt. When some of the things that she said she did not have to say, like he made me call him my lion. I mean
Yeah,
that was personal.
there's nothing so strong as a lover's revenge, and I think that that's exactly what that was. Is that she did not, for whatever reason, pick up on all the huge clues he was giving her that he was trying to do this to save her. Not only is she no longer safe because he didn't want her around so that he could save her life essentially, but now she's against him, and when he's like, Shay, don't do this. This is, and have they at all in the show talked about his first quote unquote marriage?
He
Or is that-
told he told the story to Shay and Braun in the first
Okay.
season.
Okay. Because I mean, definitely that foreshadowing of his family kind of walking in and parading this woman in front of him, and it's just depressing. But I thought it was beautifully performed. I mean, Peter Dinklage is a great actor. He does not have the best British accent in the universe, but I thought he played those scenes really well, and I thought that you definitely feel for him, and that's so close. I joked to Michael as we were watching. I was like, I still feel like he would have made an awesome, awesome Ranger of the Night's Watch. I just think it would have been awesome. He would have like whipped them into shape, turned it around. It would have been fantastic. So
Yeah.
no spoilers, but I don't think that's happening.
So
Something tells me that things are
So he leaves with that the scene ends with him saying, "Okay, this trial is a farce. I'm not gonna plead to anything. I want I instead of doing a trial, I wanted call in a champion to fight for me against someone." I can't remember in the books now how this worked out. It's been a while, so.
Well, I mean, he does call for that, and it's not surprising. I mean, Martin is obsessed with, that age of stuff where everything was settled with, like,
Neat and clean.
I'm accusing her of adultery. Well, let God figure it out by letting two guys knock each other. The first one who dies represents the guy that wins, because that makes sense. I spent a lot of time reading Arthurian literature, and everything always comes down to that. But I think it's funny because I do feel like Tyrion is making a comment on how ridiculous it all is, because he happens to know this loophole that's a completely ridiculous loophole that happens to get by him a little bit of time.
So do you think I kind of thought Oberyn only asked a couple questions, but I didn't think he was necessarily ready to declare guilty, but I guess he didn't have to, because I guess, is it just a majority, or would it have had to have been unanimous?
I'm not well versed enough in the laws of Westeros and
Westeros law,
but yeah, I mean, I think he probably feels more of a kindred spirit. I think he's like whores, and did you do what he said you were going to do?
I kind of am liking this guy.
He's like, I want to hear more. I mean, she did get a little graphic about putting things places and whatnot. So, I don't know.
But I was just, I mean, I guess the Merrill guy would have done whatever Tywin said. So I guess it would make a difference who the third person was if it was just a majority that they needed. I don't know if any viewers can answer this legal question.
Is anyone writing a thesis on the laws of of men and gods? Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good place to leave the episode. Although I gotta say, I was missing some Jon Snow. I saw a Jon Snow bobblehead. My birthday is coming up, just so you know. I totally want that Jon Snow bobblehead. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I get sad when we don't get much happening from Team Stark/Snow. I mean, I complained last week that there was too much Arya, but now we only got sort of rumor of the Hound wandering around, and I was missing. There were no Stark kids. So.
Well, I think that the next episode, I don't know, the promos looked thrilling, so.
Yeah, we got to catch up with that.
Yeah, I hope it kicks it up a notch, because this episode was pretty weak sauce for me. I mean, it moved some things ahead, but it just felt pretty disappointing.
Well, that usually happens at this point in the 10 episodes, don't you think?
Yeah, this is halfway through.
And then, like, episode 7, you know, something knocks your block off, and then it's quiet, and then, you know, the great finale before we're sent into...
I mean, they've already renewed it for, like, 17 seasons at this point, so...
George R.R. Martin is just like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
I work in marketing and PR during the day, so I always find it funny. Like, there must be somebody who's in charge of the press releases, and they're, like, the most boring. Like, nobody cares. There's, like... So they picked up Game of Thrones again, yay! And everyone's like, of course they did. Like they would be stupid, all that work. But I read this beautiful press release, and it's all happy, and nobody cares because it's just an assumed. But Michael, you should talk about what you said though as you were watching the opening credits. I thought it was nerdy and adorable.
I was celebrating the fact that you know, it's 2014 and we have a hit television show that is based on a fantasy series with an introduction that is a made-up world, like a map of a fantasy world that doesn't really exist, and it just blows my mind every time I watch it. I mean, as a kid, anytime any show would come on that had any sort of like sword play or fantasy elements, I would always just get super excited, and they all sucked.
Awesome that we have come on, the Dungeons and Dragons film was some fine cinema.
It's great that we have. I mean, as disappointed as I was in this episode, aside from like the last 10 minutes, it's awesome. We're lucky to have a show that is based on this excellent series of books that is being done so well and is in such great hands. And
I will say, I think in a lot of ways it's improving on the books, because I think a lot of people treat the books like they're this holy, like completely, I don't know, you should never ever change them. But, you know, I think that Martin made some missteps perhaps along the way from a narrative perspective, and I think the show is tightening up a lot of stuff and making it kind of more interesting. And what he's choosing, I think I mentioned this before, but what he's choosing to bring out, what they're choosing to bring out, I think speaks a lot toward where potentially the next book is going to go, and where the rest of us geeks are going to, you know, squee whenever he publishes that. But then I was thinking, you know, I had a weird thought today, because I was talking to someone at work, and they were like, well, what happens if George R.R. Martin dies? And I'm like, would it be that bad?
It's so bad.
Terrible. I mean, obviously, I feel really sad for him. I'm sorry, George. You know, but people always ask me that because I'm like the resident nerd at work. But like, I think that they've got enough going in this show that they could totally do it. It's different than like the Robert Jordan books, where there wasn't a fictional or a movie adaptation of it. We actually have a group of people who at this point are so well versed in these characters that I kind of trust them almost more than I trust George Martin at this point. So like, dude, I've been waiting a decade. I didn't have children when I first started reading this. I'm a second grader.
Well, and I was looking at I was looking at the, you know, Book Expo is coming up in New York City, and I was looking at the Kirkus review of books, and they were talking about this book, the the Queen of Tarling or Tyrling, and they describe it as Hunger Games meets Game of Thrones.
Oh.
And apparently it's got huge buzz. And the Kirkus reviewer was like, I'm not sure what the big deal is about. Like, I wasn't crazy about it, but you say, all you have to say is, oh, it's Game of Thrones meets something, and boom, you've got this whole, audience of people who are like, it's going to be 4 years before another Martin book comes out. We'll take it. Yeah. So, I think that this is driving, a lot of the other, books and shows that are going to be coming out too. This is going to be the standard.
So I also wonder, Andrea and I spoke at a college last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever that was in Baltimore. We were at the college, the University of, what is it?
The University of Notre Dame at Maryland.
Yes, and spoke to a bunch of young women, and I kind of realized halfway through talking to them that they had actually grown up with Harry Potter. So they were the age where they had actually probably started when they were in elementary school, and now they're in college. And I almost wonder if Game of Thrones for a lot of people is like, people joke that it was Twilight. I like to try and hope and think that readers of Harry Potter are a little bit more sophisticated than Twilight readers. But I almost wonder if it's, it's, in my opinion, Game of Thrones is a lot more accessible than Lord of the Rings. I mean, Lord of the Rings is hard to read. Game of Thrones, at least, is very cinematic. I remember when I was first reading it, and I was like, this is just begging to be turned into a television show.
Right.
He's a TV writer. He's got all the right beats. It's structured in such a way. Lord of the Rings, like, okay, so first we're going to cut 90% of all of this, exposition, and then we're going to actually describe characters. I mean, not to knock on it.
Some poetry.
And then, please, God, get rid of some of the poetry. And not that it's bad. I think that it's much more accessible to an audience that grew up on Harry Potter, which kind of, laid a foundation for this kind of storytelling in sort of like it's a secondary world, but wrapped within our own world. And this is like a full secondary world where you can take that jump. So, I mean, that's just my total 2 glasses of wine theory at this point.
I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that it doesn't have these annoying fantasy tropes. I mean, it has a few, obviously, but the characters are complex, and there are tons of shades of gray, and
no glib tongue and an easy smile.
Ready smiles.
Ready smile. I didn't have that game, so I've only seen the card.
It's not a Dungeons and Dragons game. It's a political thriller set in a secondary world, and it happens to have swords instead of 9mm.
It's the boobs.
And it has those.
And we had like a tally of boobs versus penises.
There's someone there's a writer who does that, and then he's like, it's like number of boobs, how is Tyrion's English accent this week?
Bad this week.
Amount of time that Sansa is on screen that I'm bored. He's pretty brutal.
In spite of all that, though, it's still far better storytelling, and I still hold that when you have a series like this, I'm just so glad that we're in a period now where television has become a medium for storytelling instead of relying on films, because, good example, there are fewer Hobbit freaks as big as I am, but I still haven't seen the second of the Hobbit movies. Because
I haven't either.
I just don't have a whole...
After the first one.
Freeman is in it, and I'm like, I don't think I can deal with that right now, but at least a bad episode of this is just kind of like stuff happening with less sex and blood. So, I don't know. Anyway, it is 10:41 here. We started early. This is one of our longer ones, in spite of the fact that nothing happened. Tangent over here. Thank you for listening. Sorry that we're late this week. I will try to be completely on schedule on Sunday. But you can visit us at geekmom.com, except not him. But he's at geekdad.com, where you can certainly visit as well. Don't forget to comment and ask questions. If you have any theories about the laws of Westeros and of King's Landing and how things actually work, none of us seem to remember. but we'd love to hear. You can follow me at Natanya Barron on Twitter. Wait, it's over there. And there's lovely Andrea Schwalm, who is Area Photographia on Twitter, and Michael, who is at Old B. And we'll be glad to have you ask us questions if you have time. So farewell, have a good sleep, and let's hope for the best for Tyrion as we move forward. Take care, y'all.